This week, I asked you to send in questions about personal finance, about investing, about retirement in Japan, and you came through in spades. So I got about 20 questions. I'm going to go through them in this video. Okay, so the first two questions are pretty similar. The first question, my Japanese wife and I currently live in the US and are looking to move back to Japan next year after obtaining a spouse visa. Do you have any insight on renting for retirees? Good question. Second question, is it realistic to continuously rent in Japan, Tokyo specifically, and never purchase a property? Is renting in your old age advisable? And to follow up on that, is there an optimal time to buy? Well, I'm not a real estate expert. My understanding is that it does become more difficult to rent as you get older. Basically, landlords are worried about, maybe people not having the resources to continue paying the rent. It's quite difficult to get tenants out if you have a problem with them in Japan. There's also an issue with maybe people dying in a property can really affect the value and the possibility of renting it out. But my impression is that this is more of a problem at the lower end of the scale. So if you're renting cheaper apartments, you might run into these problems. If you have money, I don't think it's very much of an issue. So it's going to depend on your financial situation. In terms of buying, an optimal time to buy, I don't think so. You basically buy a home when you need a home. And it's very much a personal decision, I find. So you can crunch the numbers and then basically it's going to be a gut decision. If you do think about buying a home in Japan, you probably want to be able to live there for at least a decade or two in order to, have the numbers work in your favor because transaction costs are quite high. Okay, next question. My company recently started a 401k program with a company called SBI. I'd like to join, but I'm a US citizen and I've heard that something called iDeCo is bad for US citizens because we lose a lot of money somehow. Is the 401k okay for me? I'm looking for a retirement plan, don't want to screw myself. My understanding, again, I'm not an expert on this, is that iDeCo is a problem for Americans because you have to buy mutual funds in iDeCo, and mutual funds that are not based in the US, foreign-based mutual funds, are penalized by the IRS. They're called PFICs. I'd have to look up what that is. There'll probably be a thing in the screen. But you don't want to buy those as an American. However, a company DC scheme where you don't have control of the money is not classed in that way by the IRS, I believe. However, I would look for professional advice on this. All right, next question. Are you confident that the Japanese pension system will be able to pay out the promised amount in 25 to 30 years' time? Let's split this into two parts. I'm pretty sure that the Japanese pension system will exist in 25 to 30 years' time and they will pay out something because it's pretty inconceivable that it would just disappear. I mean, the government will keep it going. Even if they have to borrow money to pay out pensions or just print money to pay out pensions, there will be a pension system and it will be paying out to pensioners. Whether it's going to pay out the current level, that's a bit more risky, I think. I think in the future we'll probably see higher premiums to pay into the pension and we'll have maybe less generous pensions in retirement. And the retirement age is certainly going to be pushed back in the future. But in terms of there not being a pension system, I don't think that's very likely there. Lots of people like to make this argument, like, oh, the pension system's not going to exist, so I'm not going to pay into it. And that's basically a bad faith argument because you don't have a choice about paying into the pension system anyway. You should look at it more of a tax than a voluntary contribution. But I'm pretty sure there will be some kind of pension floor. Now, it won't be very generous and you will have to make your own arrangements to make sure that you can live a comfortable lifestyle in retirement. Any advice on how to convince the better half to consider some of what you advise? Almost a war the last time I brought up the idea of small incremental wins to at least stave off the effects of inflation. I've heard similar stories among my expat colleagues. This is quite common, I think. So you've got a couple, one person wants to make some changes to the finances, the other person doesn't want to or isn't interested or is worried or scared or distrustful. And this is very, very common. And this is basically a communication thing. So you're going to have to sit down, really talk about your goals and how you might get there. And I think it always is a good idea to do things slowly. So you don't want to be like, hey, suddenly let's, max out our NISA accounts or whatever, because that seems like a really big step and a really big change. Instead, I would do it gradually. I'd be like, hey, we've got this thing. Let's open a NISA account. Let's put in 5,000 yen a month. Let's put in 10,000 yen a month. Let's put in a small, manageable amount. And then, you can see how that goes. And if it goes well, then you can increase the amounts over time. If your partner's Japanese, there's a really good author that writes pretty reasonably easy to understand books. I'm going to link to those in the description below. Minako Takekawa, she's a journalist and she writes about NISA, she writes about iDeCo, she writes about mutual funds, she writes about investing, all of which are good topics. All right. I heard that some countries have pension transfer agreements with Japan. Which countries, and what does that do for people who are using their pension benefits here but might retire in their home country? Well, the answer to this is that each country has a pension treaty with Japan, and the contents of that pension treaty will determine what you can do with it. For example, the US and Japan have a consolidation treaty, so you can actually use your Japanese credits for your Social Security, you can use your Social Security credits for your Japanese nenkin, you can transfer it back and forth. The UK, on the other hand, has a pension treaty, but it doesn't allow you to transfer credits. So your nenkin credits will not count towards your state pension credits and vice versa. So each country is different. The easiest way to find out what your country's like is just to Google, your country, Japan pension treaty, see what comes up, have a quick look at it, and see if you can figure out what it means. Things boast investing in property market. I think this might be things worth investing in the property market. And that's a whole different conversation. However, a friend of RetireJapan, Ziv Nakajima Magen, is really good on this stuff, and I'll link to his channel in the description. Next question. How do you withdraw from the UK pension system at retirement without being taxed here or questioned by the bank on where the money has come from? You can't, because you do have to pay taxes here. So if you get a pension from the UK, you would declare that here as pension income, and there is a pension tax deduction on there. There's a tax allowance for pensions, and you wouldn't have a problem with the bank because they'd say, what's this money? And you'd say, it's my pension, and that would be fine. So you can't avoid paying taxes here because you do have to pay tax, and you shouldn't have problems with the bank. Now, there is a tax treaty between the UK and Japan, so that if you pay tax in the UK on your pension, you can deduct it from the tax you'd owe here. But you can't escape from paying tax altogether. Next, is there anything I can do to reduce my taxable income as a regular employee, except iDeCo and Furusato Nose, real estate, set up a company? Yeah, so iDeCo and Furusato Nose, there's super easy ones. Furusato Nose doesn't really reduce your income tax, it just allows you to use it to buy things. The most common thing for high earners here is real estate, probably, because you can, as you know, buildings in Japan depreciate according to a schedule, and if you own commercial real estate, you can use that depreciation to offset your income and thus reduce your income taxes. So getting into real estate is a good way to do that. If you want to learn more about real estate, then Ziv Nakajima Magen in the description below is a good place to start. Next, I've got two questions that are pretty similar. Which is better for dividend stocks, a taxable account or a NISA account? And second question, does the new version of NISA change your thoughts on holding dividend stocks? So basically, all things being equal, it's better to have your dividend stocks in a NISA account because you won't pay tax on the dividends. If your stocks are in a taxable account, you'll pay the standard 20% tax on dividends. Well, 20.315%. So depending on what the rest of your portfolio looks like, you may well want to put your dividend stocks in NISA. So if all you have is dividend stocks, then yes, definitely put them in the NISA account. Why wouldn't you? However, if part of your portfolio is in growth stocks or in index funds, those might well have the potential to grow faster than dividend stocks. And therefore you might want to put the dividend stocks in your taxable account and the growth stocks or funds in the NISA account because you think they're going to grow more, and therefore when you sell them, saving on capital gains tax will be more of a saving than saving on the dividends from your dividend stocks. but it's going to depend on your situation. Okay, next question. I'm 51 years old and have about 10 million Japanese yen in cash savings. How should I invest it for the next 10 years with a view to retirement? Now, this is going to depend on your situation. If you don't know anything about investing, I would recommend reading a book or two about investing. I'll put some links in the description to some good starter kind of books. And that will really let you think about it more effectively. Now, the standard advice for people in Japan is that you probably want to invest in the stock market through low-cost diversified index funds. And the best way to do that is to do it in the tax-advantaged accounts, so you don't pay tax on your earnings. So a combination of those two. I would read a bit to make sure you understand what you're getting into, and then maybe look at using iDeCo and NISA and investing in low-cost, broadly diversified index funds. So you get some growth over time. Next, hello Ben, here's my question. What is the best or effective strategy to retire in Japan, knowing that the population is getting older and fewer young workers to feed the retirement funds to be distributed, probably leading to a reduction of retirement pensions in the future? So this is why I think we all need to take responsibility for our retirement and to save and possibly invest for the future. So basically, you're trying to strike the balance between living life now and enjoying life now, and preparing for the future, putting money aside for the future. And you want to make sure that you're saving and investing as much as possible without making yourself unhappy in the present. So you want to strike that balance so that present you enjoys their life and has a good time, and future you also enjoys their life and has a good time. You don't want to get this wrong, right? If you save too much, you're going to be miserable now, and then you might get hit by a bus tomorrow. But if you don't save enough, you're going to get to like 65, 70, and you have old age stretching ahead of you with no money and no resources. So you want to get that balance right, I think. Next question. For a resident living in Japan around 5 years, what are the best investment tools and accounts? So if you're certain you'll be leaving Japan in 5 years' time, you might want to look into investing in another country using a broker that will allow you to keep your accounts when you leave Japan. If you're not sure, you might want to hedge your bets. Maybe use the Japanese tax-advantaged accounts and also invest some money abroad. And if you're certain you'll stay in Japan, you want to use the Japanese system, because that's the easiest option for everyone apart from American citizens. Next question. How much money is enough to retire? A video on different scenarios would be great. I think that's a good idea, so I'll make a separate video about this question. How much do you need to retire in Japan? Stay tuned for that video. There are also a number of questions from Americans in here, which I'm going to put together into a video on investing in Japan for Americans. Again, stay tuned for that. Also had a really interesting question about rate my investment retirement strategy. I'm going to make a separate video about that one as well. So thank you very much. I've really enjoyed answering your questions. I'm probably going to do this again. If you have unanswered questions, you can submit them there, or you can just get in touch on Twitter or Facebook or through YouTube.